Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master. And before we get into today's episode, smash that like button, make sure that you're still subscribed, and leave us a comment. That helps us out on our end with the YouTube algorithm, but also we love hearing from you guys. We've got an awesome community here, and that's thanks to you. So, thank you so much for being here. So, having said all of that, let's get into it. The prologue to today's story starts on Pluto, where the Emperor and many of his variants are currently at. There's a laboratory here where years ago, scientists accidentally opened a portal to this hell like dimension. So the Emperor and his many variants get into power armor, and they stand on a metal grate and are slowly dipped into liquid. Kind of like what happened to C3PO in A New Hope, where he was given an oil bath. But this machine on Pluto doesn't dip the person in hot oil, it is actually dipping them in holy water because the warriors here are trying to do everything they can to damage these demons as much as possible, right? So they have a paladin who prays over them, and once they've prepared in every way that they know how, they open this gigantic vault door over the portal. And that brings us to the main plot of the adventure. The guys step through, and on the other side, it kind of looks like something out of Stranger Things. The floor here is reddish and oily because it's covered in the slick blood of everything they have previously killed in this room. Around the gate, all of these remnants of demonic flesh are actually trying to come together and regrow into like a kaiju sized organ of some sort, right? And then arranged around the edges of the portal, there are four glossy, dark purple kind of egg sac structures that pulsate and throb. And when the men pass through the portal, these things seem to sort of give birth to these small, disgusting creatures that look like a cross between a huge white spider and an octopus. And each one of them is roughly the size of a face hugger and about as fast. As these things spew forth from those weird purple kind of nodules I was talking about earlier, the player characters cast fireball and lightning bolt, etc., right? And they kill these little things that are in a way kind of acting like antibodies, right? And they burn away as much of this kaiju like demonic flesh as they can. And as the surface of the room is burnt away, under all this oily stuff, the entire room seems to be made of older, deader versions of those purple things I was talking about, right? But they've turned black with age and they're brittle and broken now. So the player characters walk in a straight line away from the portal and the landscape sort of changes. This colossal tunnel that they are in looks sort of like something out of the movie Aliens, where the walls, ceilings, and floors are all covered in this oily black biomechanical matter. And every so often, instead of like a stalagmite hanging down, it's something that kind of looks like a cross between the head of a xenomorph and like a big, wet black lobster claw, right? And then there are bone devils that skitter across the floor towards the heroes, So the player characters cast Disintegrate at them, doing ranged damage at first, and then pummeling them once they get close enough to touch. As the heroes then venture further into this twisted world, instead of it being one huge tunnel, things begin to branch off. Again, it feels like they're inside of a gigantic sized body, right? And the way things branch off make them feel like they're in the veins of a giant or something like that, with each of these artery like tunnels moving off in a different direction. So the heroes begin to split up. Some take the high road, others take the low road, and they switch to flight since these ramps and curves and stuff are all so oily and slick and disgusting. Now the floors, ceilings, and walls have what seems to be living mouths on them, and each mouth has a fiery breath weapon. So again, the heroes cast things like Disintegrate and Cone of Force and stuff like that, and one by one, these weird mouths are temporarily destroyed. But then every second, they get a hit point back, and the walls of this dimension slowly begin to heal again. One of the tunnels opens up, and Arthur himself comes face to face with a Garistro. This thing is as big as a giant, and it vaguely resembles like a red minotaur. So Arthur hacks away at this thing with Excalibur, which, by the way, is still wet with holy water from earlier. And soon enough, this demon is dead, right? And Arthur finds a different portal, and it's sort of like a black hole in a way. And wherever this thing leads, this one has no vault door on it, right? Nobody from Arthur's Earth had discovered this portal yet. So Arthur cautiously steps through and finds himself someplace high tech. So on the end that he has now journeyed to, it looks like somebody else in some other universe built their own Stargate, but it seems to have like exploded basically, and this black hole looking thing is all that exists here now. Nearby, Arthur sees a wall and some safety railing that's all twisted and burnt, probably from the explosion. This building is concrete and steel. Brutalism architecture, sort of like old Soviet government bunkers. Heavy metal pipes move at right angles to each other, seemingly for carrying coolant to long dead machinery. And as Arthur explores this world, he follows the rusted metal path that he's on and finds where whoever opened the portal built these little gun platforms. And he can tell that they exchanged fire with the demons that came out of the portal. Each gunnery station is positioned behind a tall, shield like device, and each of those is slashed and burned. So these people were overrun by the creatures they had summoned. So he walks further and he sees old traps that they built, reinforced metal walls covered in spikes that have long since been ripped apart and are kind of red with rust, as well as something that reminds him of the tentacles of Dr. Octopus. But they too are equally old and broken. Arthur moves further into this factory like setting, not sure which dimension he's even in, when not one but two demogorgons charge him. Each of them is a two headed being with heads akin to like a twisted ape of some sort. And instead of having arms, they have tentacles. So he uses his spell like abilities on them, but these things are 95% resistant to that attack. So they both make their rolls, they ignore what he's doing, they attack him, but of course, as an immortal, he's immune to attacks from non immortals, right? So it takes a long time, actually, but eventually they run out of hit points and die. So Arthur moves deeper into the factory and he sees what kind of reminds him of mine carts. And the interior of each one is stained red. And he follows the rails that the carts move on and he encounters more demogorgons. So he slays each one and he thinks to himself that since this is a multiverse situation, there's no end to how many of these villains he might encounter, even though in classic D&D the Demogorgon is a unique character, right? He also wonders what this red stuff is that these people seem to be trying to mine from the hell world, right? And then the next thing that he encounters is like a huge living fireball, basically. It's about as tall as he is, but spherical. It floats towards him, and again, he casts various spells on it, eventually killing it. He exits through a door and finds himself outside now. Looking up, he sees familiar stars, so he knows he's on an alternate Earth, right? It's just not his Earth. It's extremely cold here, and there is absolutely no light pollution whatsoever. So his guess is that whatever happened here ended the local civilization, and he's on an entirely dead world. Soon enough, he encounters a pit fiend, but as before, he hacks and slashes, and eventually it's no more. He goes further and he finds another nearby building, so he explores this one, and it seems to be military in nature since most of the stuff in here has been painted olive drab. Here he finds more of these ancient gun platforms behind a long since destroyed shield. These use flamethrowers, which he thinks is kind of an odd choice when facing demons. And then he encounters some more demogorgons, as well as the offspring of that big fireball from earlier. And each of these fireballs are about the size of a baseball, but they move faster than their mother did. One by one, though, they're all snuffed out, and Arthur leaves that wedge shaped building and explores the surrounding frozen terrain. He eventually finds what looks like a massive flying saucer. So he's not sure what dimension he's in, but now he's wondering what the local year is, right? Because the saucer looks man made, but it's also obviously very high tech. And he wonders if the reason he can't figure out what country he's in is because things went so differently on this earth that this is a country that his world never even had, right? So he walks across icy fields, passing like this huge, weird vehicle. It's got four big metal wheels with tank treads wrapped around them, a sloped front with kind of like a blocky cockpit of sorts, and a tank like cannon mounted on top. But when this world's apocalypse began, it looks like the locals went full on Mad Max with this thing, adding a bulldozer blade on the front and welding spikes basically anywhere that they could. And this thing's been abandoned for ages and left out in the elements here for decades. He continues on, eventually reaching the shore. And for the first time, he realizes that he is someplace akin to Antarctica, right? Just, again, not his. So he turns around and he heads back the way that he came, and he returns to that black portal and re enters the hellscape that he had been in before. And he catches up with his variants and tells them what he found. They discuss it, and as is so often the case, the multiverse is infinite in size, right? So therefore, it contains infinite problems, and our heroes can't be everywhere at once. since whatever happened on this newly discovered Earth seems to have happened decades ago, Arthur and his men feel bad for the people who opened that portal and it ended their civilization. But with the sphere of entropy still out there, the Arthurs have more pressing matters right now to concern themselves with, which brings us to the epilogue of this one. The sphere of entropy does indeed still exist, and several of the immortals of entropy are the necrons of their various worlds. And many of these necrons have teamed up with their variants in much the same way we just saw the Arthurs doing with their own variants, right? And it was one of these alternate necrons who is the reason that this world Arthur just went to is dead, right? The name of that Earth is Earth 1-618-152-152-053-201-518. And this particular Necron taught them how to build the portal, right? And doing things like that is exactly how the sphere of entropy normally does things. They will give people ideas through their dreams. Scientists may invent a thing, not even realizing the disaster it will lead to. And then, when, in this particular case, when the portal is opened and the danger finally becomes obvious, right? The sphere of entropy leads the humans to think there's something valuable in there, right? Something that they have to mine, something that's worth the risk. And then that greed causes them to keep it open when maybe otherwise they would have closed it, right? Anyway, so you get the idea that this is how these guys work. And on some alternate Earths, it was the sphere of entropy that whispered in the ear of the Germans in the 1930s that anyone who thinks differently than they do is somehow less than human, that they're vermin, right? And that they gotta go. And then on some Earths, the sphere of entropy are the ones who gave mankind the ability to split the atom, hoping that countries would have wars and wipe each other out, right? And on some Earths, they tell scientists, hey, there's not enough resources and there's too many people. So the humane thing to do would be to create some kind of new germ, right? And that will make life better for the few who survive it. And so the cause of death varies from Earth to Earth, but it's often these uh, entropy based immortals working behind the scenes, right? But never taking direct action against a mortal. They try to trick mortals into wiping out other mortals, right? But now on Earth K, those immortals are breaking all the rules, right? They are taking direct action against mortals. They are leveling up. They're granting immortality to friends and family who then in turn some of them are starting to do likewise. And ironically, without requiring new immortals to pass any sort of tests, that's going about as well as it would if you started handing out free driver's licenses to children, right? Which ironically for now the Immortals of Entropy kind of like that this is happening because the PCs are actually doing their work for them. Chet, for instance, travels back in time using the spells from the Chronomancer book, and it is he who makes the party world from his first appearance. And of course, he also made fluorescent black, which is arguably the most powerful drug of all time, right? He gives it to various people who then love it and want more, but they need Chet to make it for them. But kind of like I said a little while ago, the immortals can't be everywhere at once, right? And for the most part, whatever Chet makes himself, he snorts with whatever few people happen to be in his vicinity at the time. So some of those other people at those former parties that he threw start to do their best to try to synthesize fluorescent black. And unfortunately, what they come up with is something called Perry, which I mentioned a while back on the podcast. Perry, by the way, is Latin, and it's where we get the word perish. And it is the Council of Necrons who whisper the formula of Perry into the ears of those wanting to make the stuff, right? And while Chet made fluorescent black using the wish spell and it had no side effects, the Immortals of Entropy have no such qualms, right? And since Chet had traveled back in time, it is the villain known as Barracuda who then starts to distribute Perry, or synthetic black, as it is sometimes called. But he's sending this stuff out through the multiverse, right? And just as Perry is a knockoff of the impossible drug called fluorescent black, Barracuda runs nightclubs that are knockoffs of the Continuum Bar and Grill. So Chet's invention is impacting the multiverse now, one world at a time, right? And and then now here at the very end of the epilogue, we see a third sphere of immortals out there in the multiverse, which is the sphere of time. They see all of this. They think things are getting out of hand, and they start to suggest maybe we need a reboot. Maybe the timeline needs reset, so on and so forth, so that there's balance again between the, all the craziness that is already going on. So that was the cliffhanger that we ended this one on. We had a good time playing this one out. We hope that, as always, you enjoyed hearing about it. If so, smash like, make sure that you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. And from everybody here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.